Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, Israel and Iran, what's coming next? So we're going to dive into this. Guys, I'm pre-recording this really quickly, and then I'm going to throw it up as a premiere and join the live chat. Again, I still haven't fixed the bugs on sharing a screen during a live stream, so that's why this isn't live, but it's pretty close to live. It'll probably be 30 minutes after I record it. This is about 9:30 Eastern time on Monday night. You might hear some thunder in the background. There's a big thunderstorm outside right now. But again, I haven't worked out those bugs. I will get to do that at some point, but between work and having to get our youngest daughter to bed, and our oldest daughter had softball practice, and our son has this theater production that's going on, so it's one thing after another. But here we are. So let's dive into this, look at what is likely to happen next, what we're seeing in the markets that indicate what might happen next. And I'll explain that as we go through. So we all know what happened on Saturday with Iran and the massive attack on Israel, talking around a little over 300 drones and missiles. The big question is, what happens next? And the latest news is this right here. So this is from Zero Hedge, but this is across all of the news outlets right now. It says, Israel readying imminent attack on Iran as airlines cancel flights to region. Again, this is slightly pre-recorded, not live, so by the time you see this, there may be an attack underway already in the news headlines. I don't know. But even if there is, the question is, will that response be a muted response that de-escalates? Because the question is, even if Israel decides, well, we're going to respond, which I'm pretty sure they're going to, because they flat out said before Saturday an attack directly from Iranian soil on the nation of Israel will be met with a furious response. So we would expect that they will follow up through that. But the question is, what is that response? Is that response all-out war? Or is it, a volley, some missiles over in an abandoned warehouse so that we can say we responded and try to de-escalate the situation? Is it an attempt to de-escalate that will not be seen that way by Iran, or vice versa? Maybe whatever Israel does, Iran responds, and we don't know. This is a volatile situation, and I would say outside of, even among the people that are in the know and what Israel is planning to do next, really have no idea how it will all unfold. They may think, well, we're going to have a muted response, and then that'll sort of be the end of it. But when you get involved in these types of conflicts, the probability of a miscalculation is really high. So we don't know what's going to happen as a result of this. So the question is, what next? And guys, I don't know, because of the fog of war. You don't really know what to believe in the headlines, what not to believe. We don't know how this is going to unfold. Here's one headline that I saw earlier today. This is from the Daily Express. It says, Iran strike on Israel was a decoy as Tehran could launch an attack that is 10 times bigger. And of course, this was really put out by a mouthpiece for the Iranian government. So you had to take that with a grain of salt, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean that it's incorrect, right? We could see a much larger response. I don't think this was the best response that Iran could put forward. What we have to ask is, was this an attempt by Iran to launch this limited strike. They came out right after it with the statement that said, we consider the matter over. Is this their attempt to save face because they had to respond in some way, but they wanted to respond in a way that wasn't overwhelming so that they could de-escalate the conflict? Or, and I think this is much more likely, did they attack in such a way that they could gather intelligence on how Israeli defenses stood up against how was the attack defended against by Israel? That's valuable intelligence for not just Iran, but other nations as well. You can be sure they were watching that. But no doubt about it, Iran could launch a much larger attack than what we've seen from Hezbollah alone. The barrage of missile fire, rockets, could be on a much larger scale than what we saw Saturday. And if you have any doubt about that, just think about what we saw post October 7th with some of the rockets that had come into Israel from Gaza. These were, in many cases, homemade rockets, and yet they were able to penetrate Israeli defenses, hit certain areas. So we have to expect that much more sophisticated missiles would be able to penetrate as well. We did see some of those get through. I think it was more than the 1% that's reported. They said, well, 99% of these were taken out. It was a lot, no doubt about it. But, out of 300, you can see the videos of more than 1% just with your own eyes. So again, the fog of war, who knows what's true here, what is not. One thing that we did get from this attack, it's highlighted in this article right here. It says, Israel's defense against Iran attack overnight likely cost over $1 billion. So somewhere between $1 and $1.3 billion just to defend against that attack on Saturday night. Iran, the assets that they sent over were 1/10 of that. So this highlights once again this issue we have with drone warfare, which is going to get more sophisticated. Drones are going to become cheaper. They're going to become better in many ways. And yet they're being defended against by much more expensive conventional weapon systems. And so the math over time doesn't add up on this one. So that's something we definitely want to keep our eyes on with this. But the question is, what is going to happen next? And again, I don't think anybody knows, even the people within the Israeli and Iranian governments making these decisions. I think they know what they want to do. Maybe, there could be division certainly within the ranks. But even if they know exactly what they plan to do next, they do not know how the other is going to respond. And history is filled with examples of nations going to war and making miscalculations, thinking, well, I'll be able to do this, and then that'll be the end of it. Turns out it's not. It escalates further. You can hear the thunder in the background, I'm sure, on this one. But what I wanted to talk about tonight specifically, so on Saturday when I did the live stream, I was planning to go on and do one. I'd written down the title. What was the title was going to be War Signals in the Markets, meaning we could look at the financial markets leading up to that night, and they were telling us that war was coming, that this attack by Iran was likely coming. And so before I could go live with that, the attack from Iran came, maybe in that 20-minute period. So I had to completely readjust and move on to something else. But I wanted to cover those topics today. Look at what was being looked at then, because that will give us an indication of what is it saying now, because I think that tells us a lot. So I want to start right here with this. So this is from Luke Groman's Twitter feed. And this may seem, I'm going to tie this back, so this may seem irrelevant, but he says, gold, remember the U.S. government debt cliff people have been warning about for 40 years? So my whole life, people have been saying, you can't deficit spend like this forever. And people have said, well, hadn't been a problem so far. One day it'll matter, but it's not now. Well, is that the case? Well, he says it was back there, that cliff. You went over it in 2022. So here we see this divergence between the gold price and, what is it, 10-year Treasury real rates. So this is telling us, at least for part of this time, that the United States government has a spending problem, a big spending problem that's going to become even bigger, as we've talked about numerous times, and thus this rise in gold as investors dump U.S. treasuries in exchange for gold. However, we see the spike right up at the end here. And so for the last couple of weeks, we've seen gold hitting all-time high after all-time high. So let's take a look at the gold chart. This is the gold chart in U.S. dollars, because you can look at gold denominated in all sorts of currencies, but this is year to date. As we see, it started the year around $2,000 an ounce. Whoops, well, this is a one-year chart. Let me get to the year-to-date chart. So it started the year 2,070 per ounce, hit a low probably right under 2,000 about 2 months ago exactly. And then we started to see this rise. And so it looked like, well, people are concerned about the deficit, they're concerned about the economy, the banking crisis, all sorts of things that could be coming from this. But around this time right here, near the end of March, this climb right here, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 days where it pulls back, is all-time high. Every day, gold closed at a new all-time high. It did so here, 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 here. Skipped a day, then here, then here, then here, then skipped a day, then here, 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 including, guys, today. Now, the only gold hit a little bit higher than this intraday on Friday, as people were talking about this conflict coming. But I think all of this, certainly in hindsight, but even by the end of last week, it was clear that gold was sending a signal that war was imminent. And so what I think we can take away from this is there's all sorts of speculation that this is the end of it, right? Iran attacked. The United States is applying pressure to Israel not to respond, or not to respond in a significant way. Israel is saying, well, we're going to respond, but we're going to do so in a way that doesn't escalate into a regional war. Not sure how they would know that. But what I would say is that if this were the end of it, if Israel were to say, we're not going to respond to this and everything is going to calm down and be normal, right, which we know isn't the case, I would expect to have seen gold dropping today, not hitting a new all-time high. That tells me that there's many people still expecting that this is not the end, that this is going to escalate further. That's what it says. I mean, again, there are many people who are privy to these conversations behind closed doors, and they're the ones with the money to invest in these things. This is why these often are indicators of what's going to happen. What else do we see? Well, we see the same thing happening with oil. So here we can take a look at year-to-date oil. And again, we see around the time of the attack on Iran's embassy that killed those high-ranking military officials, we see the spike in oil. See it come down a little bit. But again, if this weekend's events were the end of the matter, as many people speculate, I would expect that oil would be going down in response to that. Instead, it's maintained where it's at. It's actually up a little bit today. So again, this is telling me that the markets, at the very least, don't know what's going to happen yet. They aren't ready to say this is going to de-escalate. That's what it tells us. Same thing with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was the only real global market that was open over the weekend because it trades 24/7. And if we take a look at, well, here's our year to date on Bitcoin. If we go down to a 5-day chart, this right here was Saturday when news hit that Iran had launched an attack on Israel, and we see this precipitous drop midday from 67,000 range to the 62,000 range. So that's a 7% drop in really a matter of minutes, in about 15-20 minutes. A 7% drop. So had markets been open, if this had been today that this happened, well, we would have seen huge gyrations in the marketplace, let's put it that way. But again, some of this started to come back, but it never got back to where it was before, and it's ended the day still off of these lows from Saturday, but not by much. Again, I would expect this to spring back if this was to be nothing. So that leads me to believe that at the very least, markets aren't sure. This remains a volatile, flowing, developing situation. And at the worst, it could be signaling, yes, it's going to escalate. If it does escalate, guys, then we will see something similar to what we saw with Bitcoin right here in just about every global market you can think of, because we are already in a very precarious situation when it comes to the global financial system. If there's an escalation of war in the Middle East, which almost certainly would threaten oil supplies, at the very least we'd see $100 a barrel oil. In all likelihood, an all-out war between Iran and Israel would lead Iran to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. That's a valuable piece of leverage they have at their disposal. Can't believe they wouldn't take advantage of that and use that. That could spike oil prices significantly. Really, that quick and sharp rise in oil prices would cause all sorts of issues with global margin calls, different derivatives plays. We can't even know what the implications would be. There's no one person on earth that can know what the implications would be. But I can tell you from a 10,000 foot view, it would mean a whole bunch of stuff would blow up. I'm not talking literally, but financially, a whole bunch of positions would come unraveled, and we would see global selling in the market. And one of those positions you need to keep your eye on. We talked about this last week, and we talked about this a little bit in the live stream Saturday night. But we are seeing a sharp rise in the Japanese yen relative to the dollar. So right now, the Japanese yen takes 154.35 yen to buy $1. To put that in perspective, that is a 30-year low. You have to go back to 1990 to find a time when that was worse. And you may look back and say, well, look over here in the early 80s, it was 250 to 1. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is they had to have something called the Plaza Accord in late 1985 in order to devalue the dollar relative to the yen and a bunch of other foreign currencies in order to create major fractures within the financial system back at that time. So we're getting near to that point again. And the problem we have here is Japan is a major importer of energy, but oil in particular. Japan does not have really a domestic oil industry of any sort, of any amount that matters. Let's put it that way. They might have a couple of oil wells, but nowhere near what they need to run an economy the size of Japan's. So they are relying on importing the oil that they need. If oil prices spike and simultaneously you have their currency being devalued against the dollar and other currencies, and especially there's still a large amount of oil traded in dollars, then that means that you're seeing a much more rapid rise in oil prices for the Japanese. This would threaten their economy. It threatens their currency. So the belief is the Bank of Japan would step in and intervene and sell off foreign holdings in order to buy in and defend their currency. Now, why that matters is there's been something going on for well over a decade now known as the yen carry trade, where the Bank of Japan has kept interest rates very low, artificially low, for 17 years now. Less than 1% on Japanese government debt. So what a lot of Western financial institutions have done is they've effectively, borrowed money in yen and used it to go out and buy other debt of, say, U.S. government debt, corporate debt, other higher yielding debt, and they pocket that spread. That's a very simplified way of putting it. If we see the Bank of Japan step in to defend their currency, which almost certainly would happen if we saw an escalation in the Middle East, then we would see an unraveling of that yen carry trade. It would force the people engaged in it to sell off those assets in order to pay back, either buy back the government bonds that they had shorted, the Japanese government bonds, or to pay off those yen-denominated loans. This could cause a complete panic and unraveling of those positions that could really lead to a financial contagion when you take it in tandem with war in the Middle East and spiking oil prices and all that would mean for the global derivatives complex. We could see financial panic, a crisis, likes of which we haven't seen since the great financial crisis. Certainly since COVID and the sell-off in the markets we had in March 2020. So guys, this is one you really want to keep your eyes on. I've heard originally 152 was the magic number for intervention. Obviously, that hasn't been the case because it's been there for 1 week now, well over 152 for a week now. Others are saying it's 155. We'll see. It's something to keep an eye on. Again, there's no certainties in any of these things, just probabilities. But the probability is very high that we see this problem take hold of global financial markets even without talking about issues with Iran and Israel going to war. You add that to the mix, the probability goes up significantly. And I believe that it becomes a certainty once that war scenario plays out, once we see oil prices spike if we see that all-out war scenario take place, or even a naval blockade of some sort by Iran against Israel. We talked about that on Saturday as well. They could use Hezbollah to attack shipping in the Mediterranean, continue to attack shipping in the Red Sea, and then use the same tactics they've used in the Red Sea to attack shipping in the Persian Gulf and to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. If they did that and said, we're going to continue to do this until Israel ends its, attacks on Gaza, or until Israel gives in to whatever demands we make, I would think the world would quickly turn against Israel because they need that oil. Unfortunately, that's what would probably happen. But it would create a very bad situation for financial markets if we saw that. We would see spiking oil prices. We would see a contagion throughout the markets as all these dominoes just started to fall one after another, because oil is so critical. It's the lifeblood of the global economy. It's critical to all of these different industries, all of the financial industry as well, with all these different financial instruments that have been wrapped around it. So again, another metric to keep your eye on is this one right here, the US 2-year, 10-year spread. When we see that go positive, we'll know it's here, it's arrived. So we aren't seeing that yet. That's been pretty stable, but I would think that this will probably very quickly go positive if we see an escalation in the Middle East. So guys, that's what I'm seeing right now. We see these war signals continuing in the markets. That tells me that this is not over. It's likely to, there's a very high probability that this escalates into a bigger conflict rather than simply ending where it stands right now. At the very least, the markets haven't determined that yet. This tells me that the world, even the people in the know, don't really know yet what's going to happen as a result of all of this. So stay tuned. As soon as something changes, I'll do an update. Before we go, I want to point out on YouTube in particular, and some of you have pointed this out, I've noticed this, there have been some fraudulent comments, imposter comments trying to look like me. One of them I looked at and I thought it was me because it uses my same icon, the same portrait I have, same name, and then maybe one thing is changed about that username. And of course they ask, oh, send me a WhatsApp chat on WhatsApp and call this number, send me money, all these things. Guys, that is not me. I would never ask you to do any of those things. So be very careful. Make sure that the name matches exactly the username for this channel to determine whether or not it's me or some imposter. But again, you don't even have to do that. If they're asking for money, it is not me. So guys, be aware of those comments. I've deleted those whenever I've seen them, but I can't be paying attention 24/7 to know if one or two of those slips in there. So, if you see those, alert other people to them. But I'm going to do everything I can to eliminate those in the meantime. Now, if all of this stuff is bringing you down because of what's going on, make sure to check out this post on the Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. This went out on Saturday, and it'll help sort of readjust you, make sure that you're focused, your eyes are focused in the right place. And as part of that, for those who have read it, talked about these birds that built a nest on our front door. And so I figured, hey, I've got an updated picture. So this is just from maybe Friday, that picture was. This is from today. So it shows you how quickly those birds have grown. And of course, they're waiting for mama bird to come back and feed them. So every time we open the door, that's what they look like. So she's very busy bringing the food to them. So guys, if you haven't done so yet, head over to the Substack, brittgillette.substack.com. Check out this post. Make sure that you have the correct perspective, that your eyes are focused on Jesus. If you do that, all of the events that we see going on in the world today, none of that stuff will bother you. You will have a peace that surpasses all understanding. So guys, let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. God willing, I will see you on Wednesday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to visit my Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. There you'll find my latest videos and articles, as well as notes, where I share the latest news headlines, the articles I'm reading, and the videos I'm watching. Subscribe for free, and each new post on Substack will be sent directly to your email. Just scroll to the bottom of the homepage and hit the subscribe button. As an added bonus, your first welcome email will include a link to a copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.